The train station on Elm Street was small, that it had only two platforms. One for trains going into the city, and one for trains leaving it. There were no large crowds. No loud announcements every minute. No long lines of passengers. Just a quiet station with a simple schedule and the same trains arriving every day. The man who worked there was named Oliver. He had been working at the station for many years, long enough to know every train by its sound, long enough to recognize most of the passengers. Every morning, Oliver arrived before sunrise. The sky was still dark, the air was cool, and the station was completely empty. He unlocked the small office near Platform 1, turned on the lights, and stepped outside onto the platform. For a moment, everything was still. No trains. No passengers. No noise. Just the quiet tracks, stretching into the distance. Oliver walked slowly along the platform, checking the signs. Making sure everything was in place. He adjusted a bench slightly, picked up a small piece of paper from the ground, looked down the tracks. Everything was ready. The first train would arrive at 6:10. It always arrived on time. A few minutes before that, the first passengers began to appear. One of them was always the same, a man in a dark coat, carrying a small bag. He never spoke much. He simply stood near the edge of the platform and waited. Oliver nodded to him. Morning. The man nodded back. That was their usual conversation. Short. Simple. But it happened every day. A few minutes later, another passenger arrived. A woman with a travel mug. She always stood near the bench, looking at her phone. Then a student, then another. Slowly, the empty platform became alive. Not crowded. But active. People waiting, checking the time, looking down the tracks. Oliver stood near the small office, watching everything quietly. He didn't need to rush. He didn't need to speak much. His job was simple. Make sure everything ran smoothly. Make sure the trains arrived and left safely. And watch the station come to life. Every single morning. In the distance, a low sound appeared. The first train. It grew louder. Closer. The rails began to hum. The train slowly approached the platform. And right on time, it arrived. The doors opened. Passengers stepped on. Others stepped off. A brief moment of movement. Voices. Footsteps. Then the doors closed. The train left. And just like that, the platform became quiet again. Oliver looked down the tracks, then back at the now nearly empty platform. The day had begun, and soon, another train would arrive. After the first train left, the station became quiet again. The sound of the train slowly faded into the distance. Only the soft morning air remained. Oliver stood near the platform for a moment, looking down the empty tracks. Then he checked his watch. The next train would arrive in about 20 minutes. That was how the mornings always went. Short moments of activity, followed by calm silence. A few new passengers began to arrive. Not many, just a small group. Among them was a familiar face, a student named Lucas. He came almost every weekday. Always carrying a backpack, always walking a little quickly. Morning, Oliver said. Morning, Lucas replied, slightly out of breath. Running late? Oliver asked. Lucas smiled, a little. He took his usual place near the middle of the platform. A few minutes later, another regular arrived. An older woman named Mrs. Bennett. She walked slowly, holding a small bag. Oliver always noticed how carefully she stepped. Good morning, she said kindly. Good morning, Oliver replied. She sat on the same bench every day, the one closest to the station office. From there, she could watch the tracks comfortably. The platform slowly filled with a few more passengers, not enough to feel crowded, not just enough to feel active. Everyone had their own routine. Some stood quietly. Some checked their phones. Some looked down the tracks, waiting. Oliver observed all of it. Over the years, He had learned something simple, even in a small station. Every person had a reason for being there. Work, school, visiting someone, going somewhere new. For a short moment, all of those paths met at the same place. At the same platform, waiting for the same train, in the distance. The sound of the next train appeared. It was softer at first, then slowly grew louder. The passengers looked up. Some stepped closer to the edge. Oliver watched the train approach. Right on time again. The train slowed down, stopped. The doors opened. People stepped off. Few new faces appeared on the platform, at the same time. The waiting passengers stepped inside. Lucas boarded quickly, Mrs. Bennet moved more slowly. Oliver waited, making sure she stepped on safely. The doors closed, the train left, and once again, the station became quiet. Oliver looked around. The platform was nearly empty again. Only 1 or 2 people remained. He took a slow breath. Another train had come and gone. Another small moment in the day. And many more were still ahead. By mid-morning, the station felt different. The early quiet had passed. More people began to appear between trains. The sunlight now filled the platforms. The benches were warm. Shadows were shorter. Oliver stood near the office, holding a small clipboard. He checked the schedule again. Everything was running on time, as it usually did. Few passengers were already waiting for the next train. Some stood. Others sat quietly. Among them was a man Oliver didn't see every day, but often enough to recognize. He always carried a small suitcase, even on short trips. "Morning." The man said. "Morning." Oliver replied. The man placed his suitcase near his feet and looked down the tracks. At the same time, a young woman stepped onto the platform. She looked around for a moment, then walked toward the bench. Not everyone had a routine. Like the regular passengers, some came only once. Some came every few weeks. But Oliver still noticed them. He noticed how they looked at the signs, how they checked the time, how they watched the tracks. He had seen all of it before. The station was small, but it connected many different journeys. A few minutes passed. More passengers arrived. A man reading a newspaper. A woman talking quietly on the phone. A student listening to music. The platform slowly became more active. Still calm. Still quiet, but full of small movements. Oliver looked down the tracks. In the distance, the next train appeared. The familiar sound grew closer. Passengers stood up, picked up their bags, moved closer to the edge. The train arrived smoothly. Right on time. The doors opened. People stepped off. Others stepped on. For a moment, the platform was full of motion. Then, just as quickly, it became still again. The train left. The sound faded. The platform emptied. Oliver took a step forward, looked around. Everything was in order. He returned to his usual place. Near the office. Another train had come and gone, and the day continued with the same quiet rhythm. By early afternoon, the station became quieter again. The busier part of the morning had passed. Fewer people arrived between trains. The platforms felt more open. The sunlight was softer now. It spread evenly across the ground and the benches. A light breeze moved through the station. Oliver stood near the edge of platform 1 for a moment, looking down the tracks. There was no train in sight, only long rails stretching into the distance. He checked his watch. There was still time before the next arrival. This was the calmest part of the day. The station felt almost still again. Only one passenger sat on a bench. A man reading a book. He turned the pages slowly. Not in a hurry. Oliver had seen him a few times before. Not every day, but often enough to recognize. A few minutes later, another person arrived. A young woman carrying a small suitcase. She looked at the schedule board carefully, then chose a spot near the middle of the platform. Some passengers stayed only a short time. Others arrived early. Each person had their own pace. Oliver walked slowly along the platform, checking the signs again, making sure everything was in place. He adjusted a bench slightly, picked up a small piece of paper from the ground. Simple tasks, but important ones, because even a small station needed to stay ready for every train. Every arrival, every departure. In the distance, a faint sound appeared. The next train. The passengers noticed it too. They looked up. Closed their books, picked up their bags. The train approached slowly. The sound of the rails grew louder. Then it arrived at the platform. The doors opened. The man with the book stood up. The woman with the suitcase stepped forward. They boarded the train calmly. No rush. No crowd. Just a simple moment of movement. The doors closed. The train left, and once again, the station returned to quiet. Oliver stood still for a moment, then walked back toward the office. Another train had passed, another small part of the day, and the afternoon continued. Slow and steady. By late afternoon, the station slowly became busier again. The quiet hours of midday were ending. People began to return. The sunlight started to change. It became warmer. Softer. Long shadows stretched across the platforms. Oliver stood near the small office, watching as a few passengers arrived. Some came alone, others in small groups. Among them was a familiar face, a man named Daniel, who worked in the city. He took the same train almost every evening. "Good evening," Oliver said. "Evening," Daniel replied. He stood near the same spot every day, near the middle of the platform, looking down the tracks. A few minutes later, more passengers arrived. A woman carrying a shopping bag, a student with headphones, a man checking his watch. The platform slowly filled, not crowded, but active again. The quiet afternoon turned into a steady flow of movement. Oliver checked the time. The evening train would arrive soon. He could already hear it faintly in the distance. Passengers began to move closer to the edge. Some adjusted their bags. Others looked down the tracks. The familiar sound grew louder. The train approached the station. It slowed down. Stopped. The doors opened. People stepped off the train, returning from the city. At the same time, the waiting passengers stepped inside. Daniel boarded. The student followed. The woman with the shopping bag stepped on carefully. For a moment, the platform was full of motion again. Then the doors closed. The train left. The sound faded into the distance. The platform slowly emptied. Oliver looked around. Only a few people remained. The evening had begun. Soon, the final trains of the day would arrive, and after that, the station would become quiet again, just like it did every night.